Hello, assalamu alaikum, good morning, welcome to Well This Morning with Shaza Hashmi today on such a beautiful and blessed day. As I always say, well, I am blessed to first of all wake up early in the morning, being able to experience another day. And then again, I am blessed to be a Pakistani today again. I'll tell you why, because Pakistan happens to be one of the prettiest countries in the world. I mean, we have 4 seasons, we enjoy more than 4 seasons. We have some beautiful 6 provinces all to ourselves. And talk about natural beauty, we have some immense beautiful peaks, we have beautiful waters and deserts and whatnot. But that also makes us, prone to natural disasters, because geographically, we have been placed in such a position where we are very much vulnerable to earthquakes, sometimes even avalanches, sometimes even, droughts and floods, whatnot. And unfortunately, in the recent past, we have been witnessing such disasters too. This is what we're talking about, disaster management in our country, how effective it is in terms of public and private partnership too, how effective the foreign aid is, and how do we need it anymore in the future as well. So without further ado, let me introduce these amazing guests to you, because they belong to the public sector as well, and they have worked very closely with these disasters and people who have been affected by these disasters. So on my right hand side, we have been joined by someone. First of all, thanks to her for sharing her time with us early in the morning. This is Ms. Shazia Haris, who happens to be the Advisor Media and Knowledge Management at ERA. Hello, assalamu alaikum, welcome to the show, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Next to Ms. Shazia, we have someone who's been on the show before. She's a very good speaker as well. This is Dr. Tahira, who happens to be the Vice Chairperson at Pakistan Red Crescent. Hello, assalamu alaikum, of the Women Wing, if I'm not wrong. Hello, assalamu alaikum, welcome to the show. And next to Dr. Tahira, we have Mr. Khwaja Maqsood Akram, who happens to be the Deputy Director of the Disaster Response, BRCS, at Pakistan Red Crescent. Hello, assalamu alaikum, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting us.
It's our pleasure, absolutely. So to begin the conversation with Ms. Shazia over here, ma'am, first of all, explain disaster management and then how important it is for a country to form policies about disaster management.
See, we have heard a lot that there is a climate change that is coming on, and that's out of our control. Nature has its own wrath, and nature has its own way of moving. So we will be having earthquakes, and we'll be having floods, and we'll be having several other sorts of disasters. Why disaster management is important is that we need to make our people resilient and ready for the disaster. They must have the knowledge so that they can save themselves. If you remember earthquake 2005, it was like 73,000 dead, children dead inside the schools because we were not prepared. As far as having a policy and a strategy for disaster management, Pakistan is working very well, because it was like kind of the experimental place in 2005. However, we need to have a more cohesive approach where all the different little departments working in different sectors need to come together, where they can have a more cohesive response to whatever a calamity that comes up. Secondly, I would like to add, people do miss it. Look, world now looks at disaster management field as a human security element.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
And if the government is not able to give security, is not able to have policies or strategies where the community and an all-inclusive approach is taken for prevention from the disaster, then we are going to be seen as weak country.
Of course.
So that's where we need that more cohesive approach, more scientific approach, where we are ready to face the disasters. They're anyway going to come.
Yeah, of course, they're inevitable, first of all. They are going to come anyway. So hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst, right? So that is what we're looking at. But Dr. Tahira and Mr. Maqsood, both of you have to answer this. We know what the Red Crescent does. But Pakistan Red Crescent, what is your role over there? And there are natural disasters and then man-made disasters as well. So which ones are you catering to?
We're catering to both these disasters, whether they are man-made or whether they are natural. The point is to, not just to reach the damsel in distress or the person in distress, right? It's just to make sure, are they prepared to face the disaster? Do they have the resources to fight that disaster? Is the damage done by the disaster, reducible because we have, prepared them, because we bring every facility to them in time? And do they know how they can fight it and, reduce the damage as much as possible? And after that, not just restoration or rescue or mitigation, it's also the rehabilitation part of it. I think rehabilitation is something that is very, very important. What happens usually is just that, a rescue team or something reaches the point of disaster and they save it or provide something that would save them immediately, right? But what we are looking at with Red Crescent now is not just preparing them before the disaster or taking aid to them during the time of disaster, but also making sure that we bring them or take them out of those trauma effects, whether it's their yes, whether it's their physical trauma on it or whether it's the medical trauma that they're facing, but we are making sure that, you know, we can actually bring them out of it. So there are different teams assigned to it, there are different volunteers where, you know, and everything and all those things. And he'll be able to explain more about how they go about it and the technical side of it because he deals with it more.
Right. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I would just like to add, like she mentioned, this is not only a response, this is a responsibility of Pakistan Red Crescent is to go in the community to talk about awareness about how one is prepared against the disasters.
Right.
We are creating a sense of resilience in the community. We are talking about climate change issues, you know, the natural disasters, natural emergencies.
Right.
So we have a largest base of volunteers in the country. We have the outreach throughout the country, and we are first, we say it, and we prove it that we are first to reach and last to leave from the field. So there's like this, with this, it's a big responsibility on our shoulders, and we are working auxiliary to the government, and we go in coordination with NDMA, PDMAs, and DDMAs. So this is all in synchronization with the government. We are not like going on our own.
Not working independently, of course. Okay.
So we are in coordination with the government. Like currently we have active operation in Balochistan. You have heard about the drought situation. Now we have a recent flood situation. And in parallel to that, we have a situation at LOC in AJK, and we are providing food, non-food items to the affectees, and we are working closely to the SDMA. And when you move down to Sindh, currently we have a drought situation, and we are working with the government, PDMAs, and we're helping the people in need in Tharparkar.
Wow.
And this is all in coordination with the government.
Wow, that's brilliant, that's brilliant. But coming back to you, Ms. Shazia, when we're talking about ERA, it was only until 2005, unfortunately. Like, I feel like this is sort of a classic nature of our, you know, people.
Yeah.
We wait for something bad to happen to us and then act upon something. Why was it that we had to wait for the 2005 unfortunate earthquake and then we had to make ERA?
You see, the earthquake of 2005 was a total surprise. Not only surprise for us, but for the world.
Okay.
You don't get 7.6 joules.
Imagine that.
It was one of its kind.
Right.
That's why you would see that the whole world came to help, because it was a big human calamity. We had no organization at that time who could deal with the disaster, which was spread over 30,000 square kilometers.
Wow.
And the terrain is kind of, you can't just reach every household there. So by the evening of the earthquake, Federal Relief Commission was immediately formed. That was for the relief and rescue work, which they were saying, medicines and all the tents, and because the winters were coming.
Right.
And then it was realized that it's like 3.5 million homeless.
Imagine.
So what do? Then on 26th, ERA came into being, which had the mandate to reconstruct and rehabilitate the area. Meaning thereby, so ERA was like as accidental as was the earthquake.
The earthquake, yes.
We were not prepared. We were not prepared. You saw the buildings go down, there were no building codes. People died not of the jolts, they died of the brick and mortar that came onto them. So then we kind of, with the help of the international community, the military was there, a hybrid nature. We needed consultants, we needed people from market. We gave a huge portion to the communication because that was what was needed.
Right, right.
So that's how we learned over the way. We made mistakes and then we take mid-course corrections because I remember in the initial days we said nobody's going to cut the trees, therefore the houses that are being built will not be of wood. And then we realized who will take brick and mortar on top of the mountain where the house had to be built. So we learned. It's an organization which came into existence as an accident. It has a pool of people now which can contribute towards, because the institutional memory is there.
Right, of course.
So we didn't have anything. That's why it was made.
But ma'am, here's a real question. As of right now, I really, really, hope we never face that situation again. But in case we do, are we prepared for that?
I think NDMA is doing an excellent job on that. Yeah. They have school curriculum developed where the children are being taught about the hazards. Yeah. If the shock is there, what do you do? So the main focus of preemptive and at the same time teaching the people so that their vulnerability goes down.
Fades away,
We tell them where you do not make your houses near the rivers you're going to go. See the case of Nala Lai.
Yeah.
You see people make houses there, and then it's a
disaster for them as well, and
for them as well, and disaster for the government.
Right.
Another thing which was realized was that, look, there is, after we had the earthquake, donor is going to go where there is a disaster. So you have to be self-resilient.
Okay.
We had Haiti, and then we had Nepal. That was a similar situations occurred. Now they are also making rebuilding, because one good thing that came out of this whole disaster was that self-resilience is necessary, and the whole survey of the areas called South Asia told us that this is the most vulnerable part on earth, so better stand on your own 2 feet. Donors are never going to come like kind of every time you have a problem.
Okay, perfect. Now, since we are talking about the 2005 earthquake, I think I've mentioned this before on the show as well. I was in Murray, and of course, Murray was like a total disaster. And some of the people who did survive, luckily we were among them. And then later on, we were going to camps and places where people were living in tents. And we had collected a lot of money to give to them. But they, blatantly just told us we don't need money. Like, where do we keep them? We need tents, we need houses, we need clothes to survive. So, Dr. Zaira, if such a situation happens, what are some of the main things, other than money? Of course, no one needs cash at that moment, right? So, for first aid, what are some of the main things that volunteers need to provide to the people who have survived?
First of all, we need a man force. We need volunteers, right? We need a lot of volunteers, and we need a lot of trained professionals. It's very important that when we prepare for disaster management, we know if we have the trained professionals for it. For example, what happens is, politicians keep coming, the DC goes there, but he doesn't know what exactly to do. He's there for the moral support, but he doesn't know how he has to take these resources and have them present there. So it's always better to, have stocks of what is required immediately. For example, food, hygiene products, we would need blankets, we would need these immediate shelters. So what PRCS also does is it provides these immediate shelters, it provides the first aid, it provides first aid giving capacity to people. So all these volunteers need to be trained in being able to provide first aid, in being able to, manage a burn, manage a blunt injury, manage a wound, manage something like that. And also they need to, whenever we are imparting all this education to people, when we say we are preparing them, we need to tell them if it's a flood, how they need to deal with it, if it's a burn, how they need to deal with it, if it's an earthquake, where they need to go, what they need to do. Unfortunately, a lot of deaths don't happen because of just that calamity, but how we, take that calamity later after that. For example, after we're done with that, we don't know how to manage it. You must have heard 1,000 stories where somebody breaks the leg and then somebody tries to straighten it out and breaks it even more. Right? So that's the problem with us. We don't realize that, like when it's a flood, we don't realize that it's just not, we're not going to just die out of drowning, but all these sharp objects can be moving our way, and they can, and you could have lacerations, and then you could get contaminated once you have a wound, and there's so much of contamination out there. And we keep getting resources, we keep getting food, and we keep getting everything, but we don't know how to dispose it, we don't know how to deal with it, and then we are actually, from one disaster, we are moving into another disaster where there's going to be a pandemic just because of, all this bacterial infection or a disease, because that's what we're doing, right? We're not controlling it right there. We had a lot of resources, but we didn't have the proper organization to channelize those resources and to provide them with it. People just don't need food. People need somebody, some organization that actually knows how to organize food or clothing or shelter or hygiene products, and how that has to be delivered onto them, how that has to be passed on to them, and how we need to repair everything up and restore it, and create a livelihood livelihood for them later. This was a big problem that everybody faced later after the earthquake and after these calamities, was that people got used to charity. People did not know that they had to build themselves up. People did not act like other nations act, and that was something very, very unfortunate.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to change now, that we're not going to make people used to charity. It's not charity, it's an assistance, and it's going to be an opportunity to help them even build ourselves better than before.
Well, thank you so much for saying all that. I need to come up with all these things individually as well, because I need to talk in detail. But since, Dr. Taira, you have mentioned the volunteer part of it and the volunteers who need to be trained.
Yes.
Mr. Maqsood, I want you to tell me, how can public sort of be incorporated in this whole process? I mean, in terms of Red Crescent as well, if God forbid, a natural disaster does hit Pakistan again, how do you expect the public to react and give a response?
Basically, the best way to respond is when you're well prepared.
Yeah.
And for the preparedness, as you mentioned already, that we are running across the country preparedness programs to create a sense of resilience in the community. Like we are going for the program School Safety.
Right.
We are going to schools, imparting awareness sessions, trainings, how to deal with an emergency. Like you explained about your situation in Murray. If you were trained earlier, you could have been, at the first instance, you've been able to respond well.
Right.
So this is what we are doing in schools, and then in community we have community-based programs, and that is also across the country, starting from AJK to Sindh. And then we are also engaging our stakeholders like the government, the other NGOs, the civil society networks, and we are imparting this.
Right.
Because we have protocol, like she mentioned earlier, NDMA is coordinating our response in the country, and we have specific guidelines, and we are just rolling out in the community and mass public how to respond in emergencies.
Okay.
So the key point is to be well prepared. You know what you have to do, because you cannot stop or prevent disasters to happen.
Right,
but you need to get well prepared. Yeah, prepare. So for that we have different programs throughout the country, and specifically our focus is on volunteers, because we have a largest base of volunteers throughout the country, and we are specifically training them on first aid, like you were mentioning earlier, how to do first aid. And then we are doing the training on psychosocial support, PSP we call it, how to get people out of the trauma. And
which is very important. It's one of the best parts of the whole process, right?
Yeah. And over the lesson learned from different disasters like 2005, 2010, we have the lesson learned. And now we are changing our approach from tangible to the soft component, how we can deal better at a fast pace, because it's the key thing with the response is to do in time. If you delay your response, it means you are increasing the miseries of the people.
Okay, that's absolutely true. But coming to you, Ms. Shazi, if you speak to the people who have been hit by such disasters and calamities of any sort, they feel like the problem with the public sector is, the government sector is, that they are short on resources. Are there any resource constraints in terms of, let's say, medical staff or medical kits or any sort of resource constraints?
Before that, can I add a little bit to what Dr. Sabha was saying? Pakistan at that time was the experimental ground because the nature of disaster was big. That is where the cluster approach came from. The UN follows it now. So we divided the people into different clusters. For example, all those organizations who are good at health, education, UNICEF was given education, WHO and others. So we dealt with it. There was no epidemic, let alone the pandemic. Pandemic has been like kind of, it's just going to cross the borders also. No, we didn't have any death with cold, and none of the students missed a year because we went into the transitional immediately we started the education. 3.5 million were sent back to their places within 6 months. That was the short time. Along with the money and 6 months ration, and then they had to build their houses on the basis of assisted and inspected regime. Right? Now, and world learned a lot from here. The question I would like to add into this, and this I have been saying a lot, that the government needs to make a database of its own. Where those who are doctors, those who are disaster managers, those who are in communication, they all can be called in a second if there is anything. Volunteers will be there. but volunteers will move away.
We need professionals too?
You need professionals too to do that, and this is the time when government needs to do that. We do not have that database.
Okay.
So what we do is, we handle a disaster. We are really good in disasters. We just are a live nation. We handle it, then we go to sleep. We have no information where those people are who made ERA, who worked in ERA, so that they can be called back. We know that we worked in 12 sectors.
Yeah. Okay.
So what you need to do is, which you said, that the human resource database has to be with government, wherever it is.
The topmost thing that needs to be done.
The topmost thing needs to be done is that.
Okay, I absolutely do agree with that, and I feel like if that does happen, we are sort of looking at a lot of solved problems already, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I love where this conversation is going because, of course, PTV is where we educate you, but right now we're heading out to a short break. When we come back, we're going to discuss how some man-made disasters can be dealt with. So stay tuned. Good morning. Welcome back to Well This Morning, which is Hashmi. We are discussing disaster management and how prepared Pakistan is. So again, coming back to the conversation, Ms. Shazia, do you feel like, I mean, every other day we do, not really every other day, but every other month, let's say, we do come across videos of building, let's say, falling, unfortunately, or, you know, there are blasts or cylinder blasts in buildings as well. Architecturally speaking, do you feel like we need to make some advancements in the buildings that we are going to make? Because when we look at buildings abroad as well, there are earthquake pendulums installed in them. And if we had to find just one building, let's say in Islamabad alone, I doubt there's any.
It's very important. It's very important. I'm not an engineer, but what we did, I can share with you. Number one, very strict implementation of the building codes.
Okay.
Because make a monitoring and evaluation department who can go and check what type of brick and mortar is being used. Number one. Number two is that every school ensure, because it's kids that are more vulnerable, ensure that you have doors that open outside, not inside.
Okay.
That's where you get stuck. If I open the door, it's a big push from behind.
Stampede,
and
right?
It was stampede, yeah. Thirdly, make ramps for the physically specialized, or those ramps have to be there. There'll be old people. And another thing is, what I would really say is that if the disasters are coming very with severe intensity, there should be identification that which household has an old one or the person which cannot move out. So we must be aware if we are sitting in a whole building that there are people who cannot move out. Thirdly, you have to start disaster training for the nurses and the doctors.
Right, right.
That's true. That's a totally specialized field and you need that. And number 5th, you have to start teaching government and the disaster management people the disaster communication techniques.
They need to be taught, of course.
They need to be taught. Because if I say it's an alert that we might have a flood,
right,
and if I say the warning is there, I have to move out. So both, and media can play a big role, therefore you need to train media in disaster techniques so that they can report things correctly.
Right. Also, we need to come to that as well, because when we're talking about reporting, things get so insensitive that they get questionable at times.
Yes, yes.
But okay, right now coming to Dr. Thyra, you know, in
So
the beginning of
something.
yes, please go ahead.
Saying, like for example, you know, when we board a flight, you know, every time we board a flight, we listen to those instructions, right, where they tell us how to save ourselves, how the mask is going to fall, how you need to put it on to yourself first, and then help the child beside you, so that once you're able to save yourself, you're able to save the child. And we take it very easy, and we think it'll never happen, but it just happened. For example, you know.
Right.
So this is how we have to deal with life as well. Every day, in every school, in every organization, in every apartment building, in every office, not just in building it, we need to have drills, fire drills, earthquake drills, disaster drills, where these people are prepared, and for after APS, even terrorism drills, right? So we need to know, and we need to, you know, be able to prepare them, and not just prepare them, tell them that in this situation, this is how you're going to deal. Just as she was saying of, you know, creating a database, when we open our memberships to volunteers, we also have this policy, and we're doing it more in particular, that, you know, we are bifurcating each of them, like each of these professionals. For example, these are the doctors, and we should kind of make it mandatory, like, you know, NCC used to be mandatory, and we used to have some marks. Remember, if you had marks, we needed those marks when we when we did it in metric or something like that. So I think they should make it mandatory for all these students to come and take these disaster management trainings, not just for themselves, not just being able to save themselves better, but being able to be a volunteer for everybody. So basically everybody is volunteer, whether you're enrolled or you're not enrolled, you're a member of some organization or you're not. I think it should be it should become a habit. Like abroad, it always happens whenever you go abroad, and people
database
and people apply in universities. They don't just take your marks, they just see how much volunteer activity have you done, how much have you contributed to society, how much have you contributed. So if everybody, every individual, you know, once they're educated, once they have some literacy to their credit, they also have this kind of you know, background to them, it you know, it improves us as a nation as a whole. So I think that
if I may add one thing, I mean, for example, there are so many these sort of plazas, you know, what do you call
those
them?
plazas,
those
big
plazas
buildings,
or all that. There should be a written warning outside. If there is a jolt, put off the gas, put off the electricity immediately, because then you are avoiding yourself from another disaster.
Another disaster, yes.
So I think we need to kind of, it should be written, and the messages should go in language people understand. They don't care about
public
disaster
safety messages on a regular basis, like after every.
It shouldn't be 8th October or something of that so on. It should be
on a regular basis.
On a regular basis. On regular basis.
That does make sense. But since we have started talking about preparedness, Mr. Maqsood, I want you to address the preparedness level that we are at right now.
Okay, basically, Pakistan Red Crescent has a mandate to respond to natural and man-made disaster both in the country. For that, we have our preparedness levels, like we have strategic locations at, like, let me say that in Karachi, in Multan, Balochistan, and KP, AJK, we have strategic location where we placed the non-food item that can be readily available and can be transported to other parts of the country. And then other than that, on top of that, we have the ambulance services across the country and that are readily available to provide response, like we are doing in AJK in LOC response. And then we have the strong base of volunteers. I will come again on the volunteers, because if we have a HR people to respond, they are well trained. This is our main strength. And this increases our outreach throughout the country. Like we are sitting at national headquarters, and we have our provincial branches in the main cities, Peshawar, Karachi, and then in AJK Muzaffarabad, in the area, and then we have the district branches. Okay. We have presence in 92 districts of Pakistan, and staff can be deployed in very short notice. And then we have, as she mentioned, that we have blood banks at strategic locations that can be, deployed for the blood collection and donation. Like we did for the APS effort in Peshawar, right. we were the first one to give out the bag, 100+ bags to the victims. So this is how we deal with the preparedness for the emergency disasters. And then we have in-country partners. Like this is what I was talking about, the localized response. There is a situation like 2005, God forbid, in future, then the scale is so high, then that's beyond the capacity of the national society, like we are PRCS. Right. Then we call for the international assistance.
Yeah, foreign aid.
In country we have different partners like Danish Red Cross, Norwegians, and we have a federation office here. Okay. And they can be, the source of extending or appeal to the international communities. Like we are the part of the federation, and we have offices in more than 192 countries. Okay. So we work in like a family system, and we call up for the help, and we get the international assistance in case of disasters. Other than resources, in terms of human resources, we have a trained people at different level, district level, then provincial, and then we have the national disaster responders. Okay. And even I am pleased to share that Pakistan Red Crescent is one of the national societies who is sending or trained HR to other countries, like we are sending support to Indonesia, Nepal, Philippines. So we are providing our people to there for the response. So this is what as a capacity we have, and we have gained from for last 10 to 12 years. So this is how we are contributing to the world too.
Well, that is quite effective, I'm pretty sure, right? Yeah. I mean, and God forbid, if we do face something like that in the future, we will be prepared. That is true. But Ms. Shazia, just a while ago, you were talking about warnings and how they need to be sent out on a regular basis. But let's talk about the warning process. I mean, lately, there's this new thing on one of the social media platforms. Whenever a disaster hits, you have to check yourself safe, whatever happens. But that is the later stage. Do you feel like there should be digital warnings for the people out there, also on TV, also warning hoardings or both signs, everything? Because in today's era, we cannot sort of ignore these things. I mean, if you're not on the roads reading the signs, you're on your phone reading something. So might as well get notifications there, or even text messages.
Yes. I tell you, like they were saying that the international community comes up. Please keep in mind, international community will only bring money when the government at federal level asks for it.
Yeah, it's all about foreign policy,
it's all about foreign policy. But the thing is that government needs to now have a big safe full of money for immediate
disasters, absolutely.
To be very honest, because we have seen donor fatigue, and how many times they will, I mean, come and kind of, how many times are they going to give you money? Regular messages, yes, social media has been such a vital component in Haiti, and in other areas also where they were saying so many deaths, so many coming. For example, in Hawaii, I saw that they have set up a full-fledged, it's a big room like this, and sector F1, F6, F7, F10 is being covered by the monitors. So if there is a cyclone warning coming at the big island, there is a message, a big island might see a cyclone.
Why are we so scared to let it out?
Exactly. So, because we are not trained in disaster communication, we don't have to panic people. We usually panic people.
Yeah, we do. That's true.
We usually do panic people.
But what's the other way, ma'am?
It's the communication skills. Right. You need training, media needs training, and disaster management people need training.
Across the message is
that is what is
right. For example, you don't create panic, you create an inspiration, a motivation.
Exactly.
You want them to come and help. For example, if something's happening at the LOC, you don't think of it as a defeat or something that people might get scared. No, people come forward, people help. For example, we just sent hemostatic bandages to LOC, and we sent a lot of surgical supplies and a lot of medicines, and so many other people came forward, so many doctors that we didn't even know, came forward and said, no, we want to volunteer.
So you just set an example first.
Yes, we have to bring the message across with a lot of, a lot of sympathy and the right message. The right message is always very important, and it does bring the right people out.
And in addition to that, for the disaster communication, what we have learned over the year, that has to be consistent, regular. If you at once come to a community and say this, and they will be afraid. So that has to be, you know, regular part of your preparedness plans, and you have to use different mediums. Like we are sitting here, we are giving the awareness. This is like we can use radios and other local things, and even the, like I would like to share recent development. We have signed yesterday the agreement or MOU with the Regilius clerks in Governor's House, Punjab, where we are dealing with the climate change issues. They will be they will be using this knowledge or awareness through their own, you know, they will be teaching those people and, you know, in the mass communication. So this is how we are using different mediums. And for like climate change issues, like it's a government agenda and a global agenda also, and we are also working to train volunteers on climate change issues, how this is going to affect now and in the coming years. This is
because
not too afraid.
It's a reality, of course.
Yeah, so we have to realize, we have to do, you know, slowly, gradually build up a response or awareness in the community. This is how you have to deal in different ways to different communities. And it's also about your audience, like you deal with people going to jobs and others, and how to deal with the people, you know, living their own homes, doing their odd jobs and others. You have to deal them too.
Right,
So this is the large chunk. This is how we have to devise our communication, how we deal different people.
Keeping all of these people in mind, we have to devise
so this is not one, you know, one thing for all.
One strata of the society. That is why they included the clerics, because that's a very big chunk of our society, and they listen to our religious leaders, and they listen to the Maulvi or the masjid. So, you know, it was very important that even the boy going to the madrasa realizes how important it is for him to plant a tree, for him not to destroy a tree, or, you know, all these little things that we miss out because they don't have access to the normal schools. We can ensure that the teachers at normal schools or the curriculum is you know, giving out that message, or the TV is giving out that message. But we had to, you know, make sure that each and every strata of the society you know, actually understands that message and follows it. So
I absolutely love this approach. Ma'am, first of all, you had to add something, and then I also want you to address the responsibility that falls upon the you know, shoulders of the journalists or anyone reporting the scenario.
Yeah. See, I just wanted to add in that we have to change our mindset also as disaster managers, that it's not only earthquake or the flood that is a disaster.
Yes.
These days, actually, it's a pneumonia crisis. Every second person is having pneumonia. Now, we know that when you are 50 plus, get a pre-pneumonia injection, for God's sake. People don't know. The medicine that is required for pneumonia is short in the markets. Because it just sprung up, and the best thing to do to avoid pneumonia is wash hands regularly, for God's sake. You're going somewhere, you're not picking it up, wash it. So we have to broaden our mind in that also, that the disaster is not only the physical but calamity, but there are other things also. The responsibility of the journalists is, number one, see if there is a disaster here, I am being judged how prepared I was by the international community. I am being judged how well I handled it. I am being judged if my interventions have brought the community back to the socioeconomic status where they were before. And if I am reported to have done nothing, I will be labeled as a vulnerable state.
That's true, because you're portraying it, right?
Yes. So you are taking care of your country also. Disaster reporting, responsible reporting. If you remember in 2005, there was a old lady who was dying and who was kind of, I don't know whether you have seen it or not, and they showed her last moments. And then there was this hue and cry that these moments have to be just personalized. You don't cover those. And media checked itself. So they were also learning. But you need to teach media. The training has to be how should they remain safe while reporting a disaster. If they are going on LOC, we don't need a media person to be hit by a bullet, for God's sake, because it's going to be a huge news. And if so, you have to teach them this. And then secondly, the language, the disaster communication. That is what.
Thank you so much for the kind words, ma'am. Towards the end, very quickly, Mr. Maqsood and Dr. Tahira, I want you to give a one-liner or a very small message to all the people out there in case they do, you know, face a calamity or a disaster, man-made or natural. What is the first thing they should do to protect themselves? Let's start with you, Dr. Tahira, out there.
The first thing they should do to protect themselves from a disaster is ask themselves if they're prepared for a disaster, right? And
beforehand.
Beforehand, yeah.
Okay.
Before they're even faced, because everybody out there should know that a disaster can hit any time. A disaster can be from any sort of disaster, and you're not going to, it's not that, you just wake up one fine day and there's a disaster waiting there. So every day that you wake up, you should ask yourself, if this happens, am I prepared to do it? Do I have everything, that I need for it? You should always have in your house, you should always, and in your skill set, you should know how to do first aid, you should know how to help yourself and others, you should have some medicines or first aid present in your house. You should also have some, tinned or canned food items that can last for a longer time. You should always have these lights, for example, lights, if there's a blackout, you need a light, and you should have some stock available with you at your house as well, always, whether it's of medicines, whether it's of health or hygiene supplies, whether it's a jerry can of water and extra water, so that anytime you run out of any such thing, you are always prepared for it. You should know whether you and your children have been vaccinated. Okay. Are you aware of the diseases that are, actually going around, and are you well protected against them? Do you have immediate medication available at hand? Do you have the knowledge? Do you understand which medicine you need to take at what time? Okay. So this is all very important. Also, you need to have basic knowledge about how you manage a burn immediately, how you manage a fracture immediately, how you manage any sort of, a calamity or disease immediately. For example, if there's an earthquake, you know where you have to run out to, which area you have to go under or you don't go under, how you need to deal with a flood, how you need to deal with a drought, what are the things you need to use, what are the things you don't need to use. So, all these things do come in practice.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tahira. What about you, Mr. Maqsood? Very quickly, though.
Yeah, I would just like to add few things, like it has to be personal and the communal. First, you have to deal, like she said, that you personal preparation, and then the communal. The key things are like the area you are living, you need to know the emergency contact numbers. Okay. You need to get the basic training or awareness about those things, maybe health, environment, any other things. And then once you are prepared, then you go for the public awareness. So this is a key message for them, like not to shy out, you keep knowledge yourself. If you have something, share, and it will be refined, and it will be, to everyone.
Thank you so much for being here with us early morning and then sharing your views as well. Ms. Shazia, Dr. Tahira, Mr. Maqsood, thank you so much for enlightening us. So ladies and gentlemen, whatever they said is absolutely true. So first of all, what you need to do at your places is make an emergency contact list and place it at the front door, or even, let's say, above your TV, or anywhere that your, people living in the family members do come across, because in any case, you're not expecting it, but God forbid, if something bad does happen, they should at least know who to contact. Second, if you're young, even if you're not, you need to go out and volunteer with these organizations, because only then you are going to learn how to be effective in case a disaster does hit you. And then, of course, you need to be prepared for whatever comes to your way or your family's way. Of course, you need to protect them. You need to be able to save them. And be able to, first of all, CPR, the main thing, everyone out there needs to learn that too, because one of the very important things to save a life is that. So if you did learn anything from us, please let us know by writing to us on our Facebook page with the name of Well This Morning. We are also on Twitter with the name Well This Morning without a G, Daily Motion on YouTube Well This Morning, and the repeat is going to be at 11 p.m. tonight. So till the next time, take care. Good morning.